Just to be aware that this storm system has originated originally from a hurricane system. It's now transitioned to a post-tropical storm, but that gives it some features which make it very unpredictable. So it's very important for people to keep up with the latest warnings from Met Éireann right throughout the day. Thank you. So now I hand you over to Evelyn Cusack from Met Éireann.
Good afternoon. So we've got a southeasterly gale at the moment and gusting to storm force 10 off the west and southwest coast, and the waves are really whipping up at the moment. Very dangerous sea conditions at the moment, and they are going to get worse in the west and the southwest in particular. The storm is bearing down off the northwest coast. I'll go through the charts with you in a moment, but Lorenzo, the storm Lorenzo, is on track. As I gave you the path yesterday, and it's going to track right across down over Ireland. It's going to enter in the northwest just to the northwest of Mayo, Donegal, and move down and exit sort of from Wicklow across to the South Irish Sea. But as it begins to move in over Ireland, it's going to rapidly decrease in intensity. So the peak of the winds will be in the west and in the southwest, and between about 6 or 7 o'clock this evening and 3, 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So it's a very short-lived affair. Now, yesterday I said there was a possibility of a lot of convective activity, a risk of thunderstorms and lightning. So from our analysis now of the satellite images and any reports, it doesn't seem as if we're going to get very much in the way of any lightning, just maybe the odd light strike here or there. What else? Very dangerous. I think the emphasis is very, very dangerous. Exceptionally high waves being generated, are already there, long swell, long waves, and they're coming up onto our shores now. And as the storm itself tracks in, there'll be very high seas. Rainfall, we've taken away the rainfall warning from Munster. We don't expect very much rain in Munster, less than maybe 10 millimetres. Over Connacht, Leinster and Ulster, we expect again about 20 to 50 or 60 millimetres at the very most. With the convective activity gone out, that reduces the possibility of localised downpours. But there will certainly, there's 2 bands of rain. There's one band of rain moving up over Ireland at the moment, and then there's another one coming in wrapped around the storm as the storm centre moves down over Ireland. In a hurricane tropical storm system, the heaviest of the rain is on the northwestern flank. So this has kept this feature. This storm has kept that the heaviest rain is to the north and northwest of it. So as the storm moves right down across Ireland, the heavy rain will come down with it during the night, and the heaviest of the rain will be in the northwest through the Midlands, the North Midlands, and then exiting out into the east. But my colleague Owen Sherlock will give you a little bit more detail on that perhaps later if you want. I just want to show you this track of the storm now, and I'll have to move away from the microphone. So here it is moving down. Here it is at the moment. So it's forecast to move right down. Well, these are all the strong winds, but as it tracks right down across Ireland, you see the winds falling off rapidly. So the colours, I suppose, in broad term, the colours in broad term agree with our warning. So if you just follow the colours. Here are starting off at the moment and then moving. This is all over the next number of hours, and then tracking right down across Ireland, and rapidly the storm centre fills. But it's really when we get away from the strong southeaster at the moment, and the winds swing around to the westerly, and that's piling in the waves on the west coast, and the really very exceptionally high waves, low pressure, and the high tide, which is at around 9 o'clock this evening. Okay.
Any questions for Evelyn? Evelyn, can I just ask you, the status orange alert, people, is there a danger that people sort of think, well, it's not red, so it can't be too bad? I mean, how bad is orange?
Well, hopefully we're trying to get this across, and we have it more emphasised on our website. The status orange, infrequent and dangerous weather conditions which may pose a threat to life and property.
You said there's 25 to 60 millimetres of rain, is that in the space of what, 18 hours or so?
Yeah, but the 60 is the upper limit. So, I mean, typically about 20 to 30 millimetres is expected. But because the ground is saturated, that we do expect some flooding. But look, it's nothing too extreme at all in that sense. And we think at the moment, because the convective nature has died away from it. So that's our latest thinking anyway. It's still off to the northwest. It looks like it will track. It obviously hasn't happened yet, so this is our best prediction at the moment. But as Keith said, we will be updating the warnings, and actually it's just really in the last number of months that our push notifications have been launched. We've done a soft launch of it so people can actually get their warnings on their smartphones. I mean, how many smartphones are in Ireland? Certainly, I think we've had 600,000 people signing up for it, so they are getting these warnings now on their smartphones.
When you say exceptionally high waves,
Oh,
those are even height above normal, would be able to say?
Maybe our next speaker will address that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's hard to know what's normal.
Evelyn, can I, just before you go,
Yeah, sorry.
sorry, just,
I'm here.
I know it's difficult for you to say this, but you know, in terms of how the impact that this is going to have, I spoke to you earlier on in the week. You said we'd know by sort of Wednesday or Thursday where we'd be at. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you can. I mean, 10 being catastrophic. I mean, where are we? Are we at 5 or 6, or is it possible to say?
I don't know. We might have different scales, but like obviously, I was saying it's not a hurricane. It was 1,000 kilometres ago, so. And it is going to make a direct hit across Ireland, but as our models have been indicating, we are still predicting that it's going to rapidly fill and rapidly lose intensity as it crosses Ireland. Whereas some other storms that can produce really bad damage is when they actually intensify as they cross Ireland. So this is the opposite. If a storm intensifies as it moves across Ireland, that's called rapid cyclogenesis, so the pressure's bombing down, or the Americans call it a weather bomb. So it's kind of the opposite in a way. Okay, it was a hurricane, but now, and it's very, very strong. It's a very deep, destructive storm at the moment. But as it moves down over Ireland, it's actually going to fan out, and really, it'll be all gone by morning. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Jim Casey from OPW.
So good afternoon, everyone. The following is the OPW report. So OPW continues to monitor sea state, tides, surges, wave conditions and river levels right across the country in the anticipation of the arrival of Storm Lorenzo. OPW issued yesterday afternoon a high surge advisory notice drawing attention to particular risks along the southwest, west and northwest coast associated with high storm surges. So the first high water this morning on the west coast passed about 9 a.m. and now the real concern is for the second high water in or around 9 p.m. This evening. And our models are currently indicating storm surges of up to 0.75 of a metre on the west coast in particular, and lesser surges of about 0.55 to 0.6 of a metre on the southwest and northwest respectively. High energy swell waves will coincide with the high tide this evening, and these are long period swell waves generated out in the Atlantic, and they have a tendency to run up and push up sea levels even further than you would normally expect. So the potential for swell wave setup and further elevation of sea level associated with swell waves is a particular concern and needs to be monitored closely, and may give rise to localized wave overtopping, especially along the west coast and potentially along the northwest coast. In relation to river level status, so currently our river levels are below top of bank conditions and well below flood threshold levels everywhere. River levels have generally fallen right across the country since yesterday, with the exception of the Shannon catchment and the Erne catchment, where we have seen small rises, but even their river levels are still below bank full and below flood threshold. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Jim? Okay, maybe we'll move now to Owen Sherlock, who is the head of flood forecasting and warning in Meteorological, again, who will just complete the picture in relation to that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Owen Sherlock. I'm the head of the Flood Forecast Centre in Meteorological. So I'm just going to cover a few things that my colleagues have already mentioned. I suppose the first thing to note is that the ground is quite saturated, and what that means is there could be issues with trees coming down. Trees might come down in the strong winds because they can't get a grip into the soil, so we better keep that in mind. The second thing is I'd like to go back into the coastal. So as Jim has already mentioned, we have high waves, and extremely high waves for this time of the year out at sea. Now the thing is, we have a buoy M6, which has recorded 969 millibar pressure, and this tallies well with our models, so we're very happy about that. Now, just to keep this in mind, buoy M6 is currently adrift because of Storm Lorenzo. So as Jim has mentioned, there'll be strong onshore winds tonight, and they're going to coincide with the high tides, particularly along the west coast at 9 p.m. So relatively, we've got tides, we've onshore winds, and we have, as Jim said, very high period waves coming in. So there's definitely the potential for some coastal flooding, and it has to bear in mind that there could be coastal effects in parts of the west that have been vulnerable to these issues before. So the next thing I want to talk about is the rainfall. As Storm Lorenzo tracks from the northwest of the country down to the southeast, the heaviest of the rain will fall to the north and to the northwest. So parts of Connacht, the Midlands, and some parts of Ulster will be affected by that. We could expect anything from 20 to 30 mils, or maybe up to 50 mils on higher ground. Also to note, Storm Lorenzo clears away tomorrow morning. There is more rain expected on Saturday. We can expect anything between 20 and 25 mils. And then on Monday, after a brief respite, we can expect another 20 to 25 mils. And I suppose just to finish up, it is an orange warning, and unfortunately someone did die last year in an orange warning, so we have to keep the public service message out there. So that's all I'd like to say.
Any questions, Ron?
Owen, you said 25, so you're expecting more rain on Saturday and Sunday?
That's correct. We expect another band of rain to pass through Saturday.
Not related to storm?
No, just a general kind of Atlantic band of rain pushing through.
That's a huge amount of rain in the space of 3 or 4 days. Are you worried about flooding?
Well, as Jim has mentioned, the good news is he was worried about the Shannon, but this rain is primarily going to fall in the southwest and the west of the Shannon, so that should help alleviate the issue there in the Shannon.
And where is the rain expected at the weekend Saturday?
Well, it'll pass through the country, but the heavier falls will be to the southwest and to the west. And then on Monday as well, similar story.
Can I ask about temperatures then? What they likely to be in the next 2 days?
Well, I suppose after warm tropical air has been brought over the country, so there'll be a slight increase in temperatures, and then we'll revert to normal temperatures, low to mid-teens.
Could you chat a bit more about the falling trees? Do people need to be especially careful of falling trees?
Well, I mean,
Saturation?
yeah, there was trees already down in Dublin City, in Kilmainham and Bettystown, so saturated soil, the roots can't get a good grip. If you've wind strong, so we have an orange wind warning out as well, just to bear in mind. And if the wind hits at the right time in the saturated soil, there is potential for trees to go down. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks very much, Owen. We might move now to Derek Flanagan from Irish Coast Guard, who wants to talk about safety and rainfall controls.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Flanagan, Operations Manager at the Irish Coast Guard. The Met-Éireann Coastal Advisory Wave Model is showing very high seas on the western and northwestern coasts this afternoon and until tomorrow. The Irish Coast Guard would like to advise people engage in any sort of activities such as cliff walking on piers, harbours, that activity could be very, very hazardous and dangerous. In fact, any protruding areas into the sea on the west, southwest and northwest coasts would be extremely dangerous over the next 24 hours. We're well aware that Lorenzo is a fast-moving storm and it will abate over the next 24 hours, but there still may be a residual swell that will be there tomorrow morning. And in that case, I would like to advise people that even though the winds may have abated, the seas will still be quite dangerous and hazardous on the west and northwest coasts. So if people do engage in any type of sport such as surfing, daily swimming, our advice is to have the day off. Just have the day off, chill out, don't be on the coast for the day. If you go into the water, you're going to risk possibly your own life, but also the lives of the emergency services that may have to go and rescue you. Our advice, as always, is stay back, stay high, and stay dry. We would also like to remind people that tomorrow, just to stay away from the coast, and if they see anyone in difficulty, to ring 999 or 112 and ask for the emergency services. That's it, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions?
Any questions, Derek? Okay, thank you very much. We might move now to Superintendent Tom Murphy from Gardaí Economy to talk about the safety in relation to.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to endorse completely the advice given by my colleagues in the Coast Guard. On Garda Síochána is asking people to, for the duration of the storm, stay away from coastal areas and drivers from the coastal roads, particularly on the western seaboard. I want drivers to remain vigilant, particularly overnight as the storm passes across the country. And this is a particular emphasis to high-sided vehicles where overnight deliveries, couriers, fresh food and that coming across the country. Those drivers to reduce their speed and be particularly vigilant in relation to fallen trees. And to put, it is an orange warning, and maybe I can put it in some context for drivers, that if you were approaching an orange traffic light, you would be expected to take some action. So again, similarly, in relation to the orange warning, heed that advice and reduce your speed and take the precautions, particularly as you're cornering or overtaking pedestrians or pedal cyclists or motorcyclists, those vulnerable road users. Give them plenty of space to get around them. Again, for tomorrow morning, I would ask commuters to adjust and take into account the overnight storm and maybe have to start their commute times somewhat earlier, taking into account any possible damage that has occurred on the roads overnight. And that's it from me. Thank you.
If there are no questions, now we'll move to Paddy Mahan, who is the Chief Executive of Longford County Council, and he's given the picture now on behalf of the preparations and all the local authorities.
Good afternoon. Just briefly, I would have given an update yesterday, but just I suppose to reflect on what's happened in the previous or in the subsequent 24 hours. Local authorities, as we know, have been spending the early days of the week observing forecasts and preparing to determine the risks and the appropriate response. And given that there are two weather warnings, orange and yellow, effectively for the counties along the Atlantic coast, crisis management teams meeting today and previously throughout the week. The risks relating to high winds, high waves and high tides, as was mentioned earlier, and the threat, coastal damage to infrastructure and flooding. So appropriate protection measures are in place, and I might go through them in a few minutes for individual counties if that's okay with you. Ready to respond then obviously once the storm has passed. So for the rest of the country, severe weather teams have been meeting all week and analysing the progress of the storm, the risks related to winds and high rainfall, although thankfully the high rainfall levels don't seem to be as serious as they might have been expected yesterday. Threats nevertheless to trees down, damage to infrastructure, roads blocked, etc., and the risks to flooding, which again seem to be not as serious as they were this time yesterday. Local authorities work very closely in coordination with the National Directorate for Fire and Emergency Management at a time like this and at other times throughout the year. And we have the support of up-to-date and accurate information from the likes of Meteorological and the OPW, all of which is very useful at a time like this. And on the ground, our emergency response teams and our general crews are on standby and ready to respond when required. And we rely on the support of the Defence Forces and the Civil Defence at a time like this. So just briefly, if you would indulge me, just updates from the coastal counties that we got just earlier this morning, and I'll go through them and with some highlights. In Galway City, for instance, 20,000 sandbags filled to date, and a special thanks from Galway City Council to the Defence Force for their assistance in this area. The Aquadam at the Spanish Arts is in place in the city centre, and road closures are in place at Salt Hill on the promenade and at various locations in Galway City and Salt Hill. In Galway County, the crisis management team is meeting daily this week, making sandbags available for collection and generally monitoring and observing the track of the storm as we speak. In County Kerry, the impacts of the orange warning from Meteorological have been assessed continuously since Tuesday. Warnings issued to the public through local media and social media to secure their properties, and warnings issued to boat owners, etc. In Cork, for instance, we probably all expect this, but the dirty cable car has been suspended since Thursday. Thankfully, in Cork, The high tide in Bantry Bay this morning at 8:40 happened without any major issues, and the crisis management team meeting in Cork County is meeting as we speak. County Clare crisis management team met this morning. A lot of protection work has been put in place in Lahinch. Lahinch is a very exposed area and is probably susceptible to the inundation of tides and the overtopping. And Clare are very, very concerned, I suppose, about Lahinch, but a lot of defence works have been put in place since 2015 on the previous storms there. County Limerick, based on the forecast from Meteorological, their response is appropriate, and they're met with and continue to meet with Senior Guardian HSE today to review their joint plans. In Mayo, the crisis management team is meeting and in position for the day. County Council have actually issued a level 3 flood alert at 9 a.m. this morning, more to do with the potential of flooding on a Spate River. And again, the levels of rain and when they come will determine whether that level 3 becomes a reality. Particularly concerned about Crossmolina, but also concerned about Clew Bay, Westport and Newport, which are on the shores of Clew Bay and vulnerable. Also Achill and Belmullet. And I suppose when the storm tracks and what damage it does when it tracks across the west coast is probably of major concern to County Mayo. Likewise in Sligo, a severe weather management team met every day this week. Reporting of damage through the council website and the social media accounts, etc., is something that is ongoing and will be ongoing. And in Donegal, the County Council officially activated its severe weather assessment team on Monday. It has been meeting regularly since. It's coordinating with the NDFEM, as I said earlier, and the Civil Defence in Donegal is on a heightened state of readiness. So I suppose from now, as the storm is beginning to arrive, it's very important that the right message gets out at the right time. And our communities across the country rely on national media, local media and the social media outlets of all local authorities. And a particular important link is the PPN, the Public Participation Network. So there are many community groups across the country that are affiliated through the Public Participation Network. There's about 15,000 of these community groups across the country, and we would be hopeful that a lot of the messages that need to be get out, as I said, at the right time and the right place, that the PPNs are a very, very important tool to make sure that people, individuals and communities are up to date with the level of severity of the storm. I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Any further questions? We might actually call on just one more speaker from the Defence Forces. If I could call on, apologies for this one, Tim O'Brien, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. To follow up on the information I gave you yesterday, the Defence Forces remain on standby throughout the state to assist the primary response agencies on request within means and capabilities. Since 1400 hours yesterday, we've had troops deployed in Galway, assisting the city corporation in preparing their flood defences, and that operation is due to come to an end as we speak. In addition, we will be pre-deploying transport to assist HSE South to hospitals in Tralee and Bantry. Tomorrow, once the storm comes to an end at dawn tomorrow, we expect to have tasks to assist with the clean-up operation, particularly mobility tasks through any areas that have been flooded and removing obstacles such as fallen trees. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Worried about emergency transport? Would you be worried about emergency transport, or are different locations throughout the country being worried about that?
No, as I said, as we get requests from the PRAs are doing a lot of work, so we've had one request for assistance at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Just give us 1 minute. We just want to update on the orange warning. There has been an extension to the
So the orange, I don't think. Okay, so the orange was until 3, so we just extended it now till 6. So I just haven't refreshed that, so that's just extended till 6 here for those areas. 0600 hours.
Could you just repeat that message into the microphone, Evelyn, if you don't mind? Just repeat that message into the microphone.
Okay, so the orange warning now for Galway, Mayo, Clare, Kerry and Limerick. Southwesterly winds varying westerly will reach mean speeds 65 to 80 kilometres per hour, with gusts generally of 100 to 130 kilometres per hour, higher in some coastal regions. Storm surges will produce coastal flooding and damage. So in a way, it's not the actual numbers, but it's the actual impact. And as Owen and Jim were saying, they're very high waves, long waves, exceptionally high, and with the combination of very low pressure, it is a storm, very low pressure, and the high waves and the onshore. Really, we're talking about storm force 10 winds. So that's our message. Storm surges will produce coastal flooding and damage.
So Evelyn, for those western counties, that is an increase in
3 hours possibility.
Over the impact.
Yeah, because the longer the waves are battering against it, obviously.
And yet in some other counties there's almost a decrease.
Yeah, so the
highlights the uncertainty and the difficulty with.
Well, it's not the uncertainty, it's our latest information. I mean, it's all uncertain, it hasn't happened yet. But what is certain is that the storm is tracking right over Ireland. The biggest uncertainty over the weekend was, some solutions were heading for Greenland, some were France, and then some were for Western Europe. So it's just the northwest now, so it's actually going to track. So it's gone from, where's Paddy? Oh yeah, as you said yesterday, from a possibility to a high probability and now to a certainty. Okay, so thanks.
Can I just ask, are we likely to see other changes then?
Yeah, no, I said that. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, hopefully nothing that will that people won't get the message. That's why I want people, because it is a developing. It's a storm. A storm is crossing Ireland, so. Things change. Thanks.